to the Dad Hammer Podcast, a casual Warhammer show where we discuss all things 40k, Age of Sigmar, and literally everything else Warhammer related. So, whether you are a beginner or a seasoned veteran, we are glad you joined us on your Warhammer journey. I am David the Warboss, your host, and I am joined by my friend, the Chaplain, Mr. Chaplain Lee. How you doing, man?
Doing good, doing good. Storms here in Tennessee, so we're all we got everyone's kids got dismissed early, but we are all doing good. But if the
What a
power goes
debacle.
off, if the power goes off, it means the storm's still around.
Is
So
this coming back? Right.
that's
Yeah,
it.
it was weird with the they did the early dismissal for potential storms and rain and tornadoes, but the, so not that anyone cares, but it was just a little odd because they released kids early, and then that's when the storms came through. So when my wife was going to pick up my son, she said that's when all the rain hit, and so I'm sure they're going to have a lot of nice emails in the morning about how they handled all that. But
Uh,
they're screwed either way. I would hate to be in their position because if you don't release early enough, you're going to be in trouble. If you release too early, you're going to be in trouble. It just doesn't matter. Yeah.
I mean, the kids loved it. They were like, "We got a day
Oh
off,"
yeah, yeah, that's
So
great.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
my little one was in school for like 2 hours. So
Hmm.
and then my
That's
oldest
a
was at
solid work day for me. Like I would love to be, just work 2 hours and then, just take a siesta the rest of the day. Sounds
call it
good.
a day.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hopefully, as you are safe if you're listening to this, your children are safe if you have kids, and but we appreciate you checking us out. And if you're just listening to this on your chosen platform of choice, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or whatever, I would like to encourage you to check us out on YouTube as well. We are in video if you want to see our faces. And if you do check us out, sometimes we'll show content or today we'll have some pictures and things to cover. So make sure you check us out on YouTube and like and subscribe, all the things because it helps us out and lets us know what content that you like. And please drop a comment as well if you have anything in particular that you want us to cover on future episodes. All right. With that, we have a great show for you, as always. But we're going to discuss the latest issue of White Dwarf. And the reason that matters is because they have released some new multiplayer rules for Combat Patrol. You could play 4 players, one, free for all. You could play teams 2v2, or you could play 3 players, free for all. So I got to play test this recently. So I have all kinds of feedback, but very, very interesting rule set. Completely changes the game of 40K. So if you are so inclined, highly recommend you check out issue 498. But we're going to talk about that in depth. In addition, we're going to talk through some tips and recommendations for teaching Warhammer to new players. I do this frequently, and I actually got to do it at a recent game day at Mechanical Keyboards, our local game store. So, want to provide some tips and tricks if you are so inclined. But before we get there, let's start with the most important part of our podcast. And, well, most important for us because for some, it is a time where we can regale in all of the wonderful progress that we have made painting our miniatures. And for others, like yours truly, we can talk about what progress was not made over the last week. But our pile of potential. Lee, I'm going to start with you because we want to start with good news. Has your pile of potential gone down over the last week, or has it gone up?
It's gone up.
Oh no.
So yeah, so I was this is a confession, and this is probably like the perfectionist in me. My
Mhm.
Saurus guard, I was painting them, and I got pretty far along, and then I just was like, oh, I don't like them. I don't like where they're at. I don't like the color that I had on them. It just felt like no matter what I was doing, it was wrong.
Mhm.
And then I looked over um, to the corner of kind of where I paint, and there was a bottle of isopropyl alcohol that I used to strip the minis.
Oh
Um,
no.
and they just I was just like, it was just a moment of, I'm gonna start again. So they've went back into a wash. Um,
How
it was
many did
just
you have?
10.
No, no.
It's like,
That's so many.
yeah. So I think like, but that's the thing. Like, at the end of the day, it's paint, and you can paint over it, and you can redo it.
Mm.
In my mind, the reprieve was, I've got until summer. I've got plenty of time.
Oh my gosh.
So they went into a bath. So currently they are um, having the time of their life. Just soaking in the
And acid.
isopropyl.
I mean,
So
basically removing all of their skin. Yeah, I'm
was
sure they're
that
having a great time.
they're
Man, I,
lizards.
I can't
They got
I
layers.
can't get over that. I can't get over that. Like if I paint that much, I mean, we're different, hobbyists, of course, and you
Mm.
really love to paint. You love the whole process, and I
Yeah.
like the end of the painting process, and I like looking at a painted model, of course, just like anybody. But man, the idea of paint going through the hours and dozens and maybe hundreds of hours to paint miniatures, and then immediately saying no, not good enough, and then starting all over again, it just hurts my soul. But I'm glad that you enjoy it.
So yeah, so they technically have gone back into the pile of potential,
Mm,
um, and then the Croot box arrived, and man, they're so good. Like I mean, it was like I got the box, and then went to work. So I was able to pick it up, went to work, and then it kind of was just, I just waited and waited and waited until the end of the day, and then kind of opened it up. And the
you're
sculpts,
staring at it.
just it was staring at me, just like, "Hey, I'm here," and I'm like, "I gotta work. I gotta work." Um, it's kind of like the Green Goblin when when he's in his normal
Yeah.
thing, and the mask is calling him, like,
Mhm,
"What are you
mhm,
doing?" Like that. That's what it was. But yeah, the sculpts were great, and then when you open it up, it comes with this binder, which is really, really good, and then you've
mhm,
got the book, and then you've got the data sheets, the assembly guides. You've got all of that stuff, and it's just really well put together. Even the actual box itself, when you open it up, there's layers to it. There's art on both sides of the inside of the box. There was
mhm.
so many like pull out tabs that you have to, in order to get. It was like getting into Fort Knox. Not that I've ever tried to break into Fort Knox, but that's what I imagine it would be like. Um, and
Just a bunch of tabs.
Just a bunch of
That's
tabs.
it.
Pull this, and you're
Yeah,
trying
it's
not
so
to.
easy.
Yeah, try not to rip the box because, like, it's brand new. Um, but I put a little montage together, for YouTube with music. It's like a Rocky montage, like a training montage of unboxing. Um, but yeah, I'm so excited. And then I was listening to another podcast by the guys at Siege Studios, and they posted
Mhm.
some pictures of some of the crew that they've painted. And they painted one. One of the guys painted one, and I'm sure people have seen it because it was all over Instagram. But it was
Yeah,
a tiger print one, and
yeah.
instantly I was just like, Thundercats. Like that's how I was like, I went, so like I went onto Google, and just pulled up Thundercat kind of images, and I was like, this is it. This is the color scheme. This is what it's going to be. And I've got like a classic Thundercats kind of picture that I'm going to put up
Nice.
on the painting desk just to help me pick the
Yeah,
colors. But
yeah.
I think I'm gonna go with the tiger skin crew because they look so good. So
Was
not
that,
the
is that, Chitara? I think that's, the one of the Thundercats that
yeah,
the woman, in Thundercats with the pole vault thing.
yeah, you got Chitara, Lion-O,
Yeah, and then
and you got
who was the
Pan
blue guy? Like the Hulky Panther, something like
Pan
that?
Pantera is the
Oh,
metal
man.
band, I think it was something like that. And then you had Mumra, who was like
Oh, man,
the
yeah, we're
the
super
bad guy.
creepy character, yeah. As a kid, man, that guy freaked me out. So,
So
okay,
like
So there's Chitara, Tigra, Panthro. All right, I was close.
Panthro. Yeah,
Panther,
yeah.
Panthro, and Snarf,
Smarf,
of course.
Snarf,
Snarf. Yeah,
Snarf,
Snarf.
Snarf. Yeah.
And then yeah, then there's the other bad guys that I'm not even gonna try to like pronounce their names because I don't really it doesn't really matter. Um, man,
But
what a show.
that's where that's where like my probably where my paint schemes are going to
Hmm.
come from. But
Yeah.
I think that's it. Like I think when it comes to anything new, like I think sometimes we feel like as maybe new beginners or new painters that we have to stick to the box art, and it's like no, like what inspires you? I think I saw someone who when Votan came out, they turned them into Ninja Turtles and had
Yeah.
the
Turtle
heck
van.
what was the
The
Hecaton?
Hecaton Land Fortress. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
turtle
yeah.
van.
Turned it
Yeah.
into like a pizza wagon. But I think that is something as a new player, like I would say I'm a relatively still new, but maybe not. I don't know. It's been over a year and a bit now. Um,
Hmm.
but just trying to push myself and try new things and not always go box art. Like so I'm like, okay, what can I do with this crew? Can I turn them into, you know, something that resembles Thundercats in some way? The problem, I think, the problem is I know what I want and I know where my skill levels are. So either I'm going to be okay with the difference, or it's going to cause me to take time and level up. And I think to help my pile of potential, I think it's going back to what we talked about on many podcasts is I think it's so easy for maybe me or anyone who gets a new box to get overwhelmed by the sheer
Mm.
volume of the project in front. So I'm like, okay, what would it look like for me to get one of the Croup Carnivores out and paint that fully in the Thundercat style, and then go and get another one, clip it, build it, glue it, base it, prime it, paint it, and have
Yeah.
that completed. And I think what you'll see over time is you'll see that succession of how you're improving and how those skills are getting better. Um, but but yeah, as you can tell, I'm slightly excited about this box. Um, and but then on the other hand, I'm like, but I want to play it. So
Yeah,
it's kind
right.
of
And I think that's where I am, and plus the new Age of Sigmar edition is going to come out, and it's coming out with Stormcast and Skaven, and those are happen to be the two armies that I have for Age of Sigmar. So it's like, well, yeah, obviously I'm going to get the box set, and then just thinking about, and I don't enjoy painting as I like, as I just said, I like the end product, of course, and so it's more of a means to an end, but just it feels like work,
mm,
getting, oh man, I got all these models, but then once I get them together, I'm always happy that I got them. So it's just I keep my eye on the prize the whole time. So it's interesting to hear your thought process whenever you get a new box set and you're going to try to push yourself and challenge your painting skills and to get into different areas that's not the box art. I am on the complete polar opposite. And I get the box and I think, okay, how do I get these with the least amount of effort and still be at a parade standard, parade level, um, fairly high quality standard for painting. How can I get them there and then get them on the table quickly?
mm,
So I'm trying to get the box in, get them assembled, and I get them all assembled, I get them all primed, and I'm like, okay, got to get through these quick. I got to come up with a formula, and the formula for me is the box art. So I'm the complete opposite. I rarely differ from the box art, but I mean, I think I don't know why. I don't have any rhyme or reason. Maybe that's just a different artistic expression. I don't necessarily like to stray from the box art, but that's just me. But well, you've got a pretty healthy pile of potential, it sounds like. I, on the other hand, mine got worse as well. So that's always good. I have my Krondus. I'm gonna, for those that are watching, I'm still working on him, my dragon. And I've gone with he has two different variants. This dragon here. He's got one that is like his mouth is closed, and I'm not a like hardcore Age of Sigmar player, so I couldn't tell you the names of everything. But he's got one variant where his mouth is closed, and a different pose and all of that. I didn't really like that when he looked too like regal and smart, and I wanted Dragon to be more ferocious. So his alternative is this, it's a scarred version of it. So his face is scarred. It looks like he's been through some serious battle. And but I'm painting him in the box art style of the more regal edition. So I've got the one that's supposed to be scarred and like orange and red and really messed up and evil or angry. And I took that version and then painted it in the nicer, calmer colors according to the box art. So that's me, branching out. So I'm still working on him, but then I've got I'll put this up here on the camera too. I've got the new Spearhead box set with his Stormcast, and I'm very excited to get this one assembled. I'm more of the assembler. I like it's like Legos to me. So I'm excited. I don't have any of these models. I think maybe for the exception of some Annihilators, I've got those. But putting those together, and that'll be a part of my Stormcast army. And then, of course, the new edition's going to come out, and I'm just going to have plastic models everywhere. I mean, that's going to have so much to paint. But
How do you tackle, like, obviously you've got the spearhead box, do you build them? Are you gonna base spray them like retributor armor, or like
yeah,
like
that's what I usually do. I'll usually try to pick the color. I go one of two ways. One is I'll pick the color that is majority of the model. So if it's going to be like I went out for my Chaos Space Marines, for example, I did all black, of course, and then you just do all the edge highlighting that goes along there. But other times, if I do a vehicle for like an orc vehicle, even though I may paint it red or have some kind of crazy color scheme, because all
mm,
of the smaller details and the cracks and crevices need to be darker, I'll spray paint it all black and then go over the top of that. But in the case of the Stormcast, I will base them all in Retributor armor and just do the gold and then go in with they have fewer like their armpits and the back of the knees and stuff usually are
mm,
black. Again, I'm going by the box art. So, but
mm,
with this box, I plan on I usually will build like 4 or 5 models at a time,
okay.
um, and then get them all assembled and then go spray paint them. So I've tried different methods of doing one at a time. That just doesn't work for me.
Mm.
Makes me feel like I've got more to do.
Do you write down almost like your recipe as you go, like, or is it just you try and
No.
keep it now?
I mean, again, because it's box art, and so I usually go and look at what the now. I mean, I really don't try to mix paints too much
Mm,
because then that requires more. Like I have to document the recipe, and I don't
yeah,
want to do that. I try to keep it as simple as possible.
yeah,
So,
yeah. That's for me, is like I've been painting stuff and then I've gone back, I've painted one of them and then gone back and gone,
mhm,
I can't remember how I got
yeah,
that to there. So now I'm starting to keep like a piece of paper. At some point, I'm gonna, get a painting journal or something like that where I can actually sit down and kind of write the recipe so it's replicable.
yeah,
But so I think with the crew, I'm gonna have to do that. And that's gonna be the first army. But the amount of times I sat down to my paint desk and gone, right, I'm ready, and then I'm like, what did I
yeah, and
use?
now analysis paralysis. You start
I,
I second guess myself all the time when I do that as well.
But I think like you said, it's just, just chip away at the pile of potential bit by bit, a
Mhm,
model at a time, and eventually you get there. And I think it's the moment like when you rock up to like the local game store with your friends and you put the model down and everyone goes like, "Oh man, like that's good." Like I kind of, I had that experience a couple of weeks ago where I took some models in to
yeah,
trade and almost had, a couple of the people that I know come over and were like, "Man, you did a good job on this." And it was just sometimes that recognition for the hours that you put in that no one else sees, but when they see the models on the table, they go, it's almost like a salute, like there's a nod
yeah,
from,
a
"Good
sign
job."
of respect. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's it.
And I think that's, I mean, we get that from doing this podcast. I mean, we
Mm,
record the show, we talk about Warhammer, and I remember when we first started, it's just like, no, nobody cares. Nobody wants
mm,
to hear this. And then we get people that will listen to every single show, and they'll throw us a comment or something on YouTube or Instagram, and it just means the world
Yeah.
to us. It's like, oh, okay, this is helpful to you. You enjoy listening to this on your commute or wherever you happen to listen to it. So I would encourage anyone that's listening to this too that put your artwork out there. If you painted a model or done something really cool, don't be ashamed, even if you're not at the Siege Studios level. Very few people are. I'm pretty proud of my painting, but then I put it in front of some of you look at people online, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not even close to that. The Golden Demon stuff, it's like mine looks terrible. Mine looks like a 3-year-old did it compared to them. But you take it to your local game store, and
Mm.
people will respect the paint job, and that's a good feeling. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a good point, and I highly recommend if you're listening to this and you're thinking about whether or not to put yourself out there with your models, yeah, go for it. I mean, it's all good. Everybody likes this hobby that you're playing against, and I'm sure they'll enjoy the paint scheme as well.
That's it.
Well, well, very cool. We both have plenty to work on. I'm going to try to make some progress on my dragon and get that done so I can start on Spearhead and then Age of Sigmar and then boy, I got a lot to do. So all right, well, let's now transition to some gaming. Had a great game day at our local game store here in Fairview, Mechanical Keyboards. It was really, really awesome. The first time we did one, we only had a few people, but we had enough to play like, 4 or 5 games, Combat Patrol at the same time. This time we had even more. I won't, and it was, I mean, we had the whole place was full the entire day, which was really, really awesome to see. And I got to do something a little different. Which I wanted to talk through this because we've tried to do multiplayer. Usually 40K, especially Combat Patrol, is a one-on-one type of experience. And when the Leviathan box set in 10th edition came out, we did this thing at my house where we had all these games set up, and everybody was playing against one other person. And then I think several months ago we tried a team-based combat patrol. Boy, what a disaster! It was so bad. Like the rules, they obviously weren't built for multiplayer. We tried to make up some things, and it didn't work well. Well, White Dwarf issue 498 has come out. It's the green one with Vashtor on the front. If you're seeing that in your game store, but they have released some multiplayer combat patrol content. And I'm going to throw this up on the screen here for those watching on YouTube. And I took a couple of pictures of the magazine, and I'm not going to go into every single bit of this, but there is a section dedicated to multiplayer combat patrol. And if you're looking at this, the bottom left-hand corner, it's got some different deployment zones. If you're doing 4 players, each person takes a corner, and if you're doing 3 players, it's like a triangle with 3 circles and then deployment zones. But one of the things that I wanted to point out specifically was the different rules for I guess the changes. So anyone listening to this, I wanted to go over those just for folks that are interested in the multiplayer variants. And this is not every single variant, things that are different from the normal game of 40K. But having played it myself, now we did this at Mechanical Keyboards, played against 2 other people, and it was really cool. So I'm going to hit some highlights. One is that one of the big differences in multiplayer combat patrol is each player gets 2 CP per battle round versus every command phase. And you get 2 instead of 1. So every player, so if we were playing against, 2 other people, each of us would get 2 CP per battle round. If you have the least amount of victory points at that time, you get 3 CP. So it is a way to grant command points to people without having to do it every single command phase, because that would skew things a little bit. The other one that was probably the biggest one is that units can only fight in the controlling player's turn. Meaning, in the fight phase, normally in 40K, you would do one player fights first, and then the other player fights, after that, depending on charge and all of that stuff. Well, in this case, of multiplayer, you don't get to fight back. It's whoever is going gets to charge, fight, and that's it. So there is no fight back during the fight phase, which is really weird. Um, Units can shoot and charge even if they fell back. That's one thing that was for multiplayer. The other one, no secondary objectives. So typically with combat patrol, you're going to pick your secondaries. No secondaries. You only play your mission objectives. You roll off for your deployment zones. So you're going to do a roll, and then you get to pick your deployment zone going clockwise. And then finally, the other big one was that you can shoot at engaged units as long as they're, I think, if I remember correctly, as long as they're not your own. But like, Lee, if you were playing against Stu or Steve, and we were doing like a 3-player game, I could shoot into you when you were engaged with Steve, for example. So I could still do that. It would just be a -1 to hit and wound. So that it kept the game just, it was just so different than a normal game of 40K. But I did want to just, had a great game. Um I played my now I've forgotten. I played against let's see, two other players, and one of the cool parts of this, I played orcs, and well, an army that I'm very familiar with, and so that was one of the reasons I took them, because I knew we were going to play multiplayer. Um, but because of the fighting aspect of it, I think that my orc army had an advantage because they're heavy melee,
Mhm.
and so I just the whole time was just charging in over and over and over again, trying to getting into fighting because they weren't necessarily going to fight me back.
Were
So
you I mean, I looked over, if I remember right, it was the one army was the Adeptus Mechanicus, so they
yeah,
were a
yeah,
shooting
AdMech.
army, and
Hmm.
then didn't you have, wasn't, the other army like World Eaters?
Yep, yep.
So you
Also
basi
heavy melee.
so I'm guessing, like, and this is just by looking, because I've not played it, but it sounds fun, but I'm guessing, like, if the Orcs and the World Eaters were, like, you know, battling, face to face, or in, as Oliver Twist puts it, like fisticuffs. The AdMech guys were just sitting back and just, you know, firing into you
Well,
constantly.
yes, but because of the mission that we played, and also the mission up here, the mission we played was called Bloody Attrition, and
Mm.
one of the really cool parts of this mission was that you could get 5 victory points if you destroyed another enemy unit.
Oh,
So
wow.
number one, it encouraged you to go after, and really you couldn't just sit back the whole time. I
Mm,
mean,
mm,
the AdMech didn't have great shooting, primarily because of combat patrol, but they the other thing was that this mission rule had something called rapid reinforcement. And the rapid reinforcement rule allows you to, any destroyed unit in your command phase, you can bring that unit back with full wounds, fully healed, the whole thing. And it was restricted to battle line. So in the
mm.
case of my orc combat patrol, I had 2 squads of orc boys as part of the combat patrol. So anytime that unit of orc boys got wiped out, then my command phase, I would set them back up in my deployment zone, and then they could start all over again.
Wow.
So I mean, it was so different, and I mean, I can't imagine just now after playing it and all the different rules. Of course, they have some different stuff for if you're going to play teams, 2v2
Mm.
or free for all with 4 people. I can't imagine the play testing that
Yeah.
was involved in getting this done, because they didn't just change a couple of things and say, here you go, multiplayer. I mean, we're talking significant changes
Mm.
to the rules. And man, by the end of the day, I was also worn out because I was like the rules master for this particular game, and having to go in and learn all of this and remember everything on the fly and say, oh, wait a minute, that's not the case because this is multiplayer combat patrol. Um, Man, I I mean, a great game that I really liked the mission that we played. It allowed for a lot of variety, and
Mhm.
I would totally play it again. I think the only maybe caveat and something that I would recommend is that you really need to know the rule set well. You need to know
Mhm.
your army list well before you get into multiplayer, because it's so different.
That's what I was gonna ask. Is this a beginner like game, or is it more like your intermediate to kind of, expert, or
Yeah, I would say it's probably, well, because they eliminate some of the rules completely. There's no secondary. So on one
Mm,
hand, that takes that off of the. If you're a new player, it's one less thing for you to have to remember, which is nice. You even though you can shoot into engaged units, you don't have to think about, oh well, I'm not allowed to hit that, or it's only for
mm,
big guns never tire, and it's only for this type of unit. So there's less for you to have to remember, but at the same time, what if you were a beginner and played multiplayer first, I think it's going to be very difficult for a new player to go then into a full game of combat patrol, regular game of combat patrol, or full game of 40K, because now you're having to throw all the rules that you just learned out the
yeah.
window. So it's kind of hit or miss. I would say that for a new player, they've reduced some of the complexity, which is nice, but you got to know that you're playing a completely different game. It's almost like
Mm,
saying, are you going to play Kill Team or 40K for a new
yeah.
player? Oh, like, well, you could start playing Kill Team because it's not as complicated as 40K, but then you can't just transition to 40K because it's a completely
Mm,
different rule set.
mm.
It's kind of the same thing here. So,
I would imagine if you're playing it and you're, for example, a shooting army, an army that has the ability to shoot, and keep everything at range. If you're playing like doubles, you'd want to kind of team up with, a melee, like
mhm.
heavy team, just so that they can go out there and kind of engage in the hand to hand, battle type thing. And then
Yeah.
as a shooting army, you can sit back and kind of, you know, pick off key targets and stuff like that. I would imagine that
Yeah.
would be a really good play for that type of
I
game.
think, yeah, it's what's interesting is that the whole aspect of team battles opens up a lot of possibilities for strategy. I would say,
Mm.
because I was going up against primarily the world eaters, the whole game. So the orcs were just kept charging over into the corner with world eaters, and I had my Death Dread was just wrecking everyone. And every single time I would take out a unit, I would get 5 victory points. So
Mm,
the strategy for multiplayer comes in where you're having to, I could send my battle line unit in depending on, because the orc boys are pretty resilient when it comes to melee. But if you've got maybe some cultists or something that's fairly easy to take down melee wise, you have to really think about your redeployment because you're allowed to put them in the reinforcement step. You're allowed to put them in your deployment zone and put them back out there,
mm,
but charging them back in or keeping them out in the open, depending on where the deployment zone is for this particular mission, if you've got a really good shooting army, you're just leaving yourself open for to give them 5 free victory points in their
yeah.
shooting phase. So
Mm,
the amount of strategy that came into play was really really cool. And I guess fortunately, unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, the multiplayer rules for combat patrol are behind White Dwarf,
yeah.
which is good because it's inexpensive, right? You can just go to any game store and pick up the magazine, um, versus being behind a big book, like a boarding
Mm,
actions book when that came out. Like, oh, if you want to play this, you got to get all these books,
yeah.
and this is just one thing in a like literally 4 or 5 pages, and they give you 8 missions in this
Oh,
issue of White
wow.
Dwarf. So I mean, we've talked about White Dwarf and how much I like White Dwarf, but I would say 60-70% of the time, the magazines come in and I kind of flip through them, look at the pictures. Maybe there's a couple of articles that I really like, and it's just cool to get something Warhammer in the mail. But in this particular case, I highly recommend the issue 498 because of the multiplayer rules alone.
Mm,
Really, really
yeah.
cool rule set.
I mean, it looked fun from where I was. My game was I played Votan versus Tau,
Oh yeah.
me and Brock, and I mean Votan. They were strong coming out the gate, but
Hmm.
I had a battle suit that was able to fly, and we were playing the sacred sites where you had to claim sacred
Mm,
sites. We did that. I think one of the best ones was. It was just one play that we both but when you have those moments where you're playing and then suddenly in your head you kind of see a movie where the movie clip is like you
yeah.
see it playing out, but with the character, the model.
Hmm.
Maybe it's just me, but there's this bit where who are the like semi-naked? space dwarfs, the berserkers,
Yeah,
berserks.
Chthonian berserks.
Yeah. So I had wiped out all but one of Brock's, berserkers. I don't. Anyway, but he was like,
Shirtless dwarves.
yeah, he was like, I'm just gonna have to charge. So he started charging towards me, and I was like, I'm just gonna have to fire Overwatch. But I had a stratagem that changed it. So I can't remember what it was, but it basically changed the stratagem, changed the roll. So instead of having to roll sixes, I think it was like maybe on fives or something.
Yeah, yeah.
And if I completely read it wrong, then someone I'm sure will comment, on the below
No, I
and
think you're
let
right.
me
I
know
think it's fives.
for Tau. But anyway, I rolled I don't know how many fives, and then obviously then I rolled to wound, and then everything landed. And the only way I could describe it in my mind, it was the scene in I think it was Platoon where the guy runs towards the firing line and they just go and they just open up and he's like
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's exactly how it went down in my head as this berserk just got completely torn apart by by the Tau battle line, like just shooting. So
Well, it's a
it
good
was a,
thing too. Those the berserks are a menace in melee. If they get in there, they will wreck you up.
well, that was it. That was the start. I'd my stealth suits had the infiltrated keyword, so I planted them close to an objective marker, and they literally like the berserks got close to him, and it was basically like opening up a can of chopped tomatoes. They just literally just peeled the top off and pulled the towel out. It was like it was over in seconds, and I was like,
Nice.
at that point, I was like, this is game over. But it came round, but it was fun. But that's what makes it fun. Is I think when you're playing is when your imagination kicks
Hmm.
in and you start seeing it on the board, and you're like, oh man, that was a cool move. Um,
Yeah.
but it was fun. It was a fun game. And it's always fun playing different
I,
people.
Yeah, and I think that's what we had talked to Stephen Box in the past with Vanguard Tactics. Check out that interview that we did with him. But one of the things that he mentioned, I can't remember if it was actually on the show or maybe afterwards. We were talking to him about just being in a tournament, and he just said that you get you just get so much more exposure to different armies. You get a different level of practice because when
Mhm,
you're playing against the same person over and over again, even if they're using different armies, you're only going to get, so much. You're only going to learn so much because you're playing the same opponent over and over again. But when you get out there, and whether it's at a tournament or at your local game store, and you just pop in and play against someone, you just a different level of
mm,
learning. You learn your army a little better. You play against somebody that has completely different tactics, even if they're playing the same army that you've played against before. So it's just a really cool experience. And
mm,
we're trying to do these game days once a quarter. So this was the first quarter. Well, I'm sure we'll do another one.
mm.
Uh, May, June, something like that, and we'll do another one. Maybe this time we'll do Age of Sigmar and try out Spearhead.
Yeah.
Um, so depending on if I can get mine assembled in time, but
That's it. I got to get mine out of their alcohol bath and get them painted as well.
yeah,
I,
yeah, you do.
I tell you what was interesting was at the game day. I had a buddy who he's asked questions. He's into Star Wars, so every once in a while I'll like, hey, check this out. It's kind of like Star Wars, like that. Just trying to kind of drip feed it. And he
Yeah,
was like, hey, yeah, I'll come along. My problem was I forgot to send him the address, and then I ended up looking at the time, and I was like, oh, game day's over. And so I said
yeah.
to him, hey, next time. But like, let me ask this question because you've done this multiple times. Like, if I've got a friend who's interested in playing, how do I get them involved? Like, what are the kind of the tips and the tricks that you've learned along the way? Because you've helped me
Mm,
get into it, you've helped other players. So, um, you know, where would you start with a friend who is interested in playing?
yeah. I would say very first rule is just threats. Just make a threat. It's like no, just kidding. Um, No, my first thing when you were saying your buddy's into Star Wars and you're trying to get him into Warhammer, if he doesn't care, first of all, this is a Warhammer show, but if he doesn't care about Warhammer, um, the lore and just loves Star Wars, I would recommend you try out Star Wars Legion, which is
Mm,
essentially Warhammer but for Star Wars.
yeah.
And the miniatures are very easy to assemble. They're nowhere near as detailed, and you
Mm,
don't paint them. Well, you do paint them. Sorry, you do paint them, but it's not to the degree that Warhammer is. So
yeah.
if he's just hardcore into Star Wars, Star Wars Legion is a pretty cool game. So recommend that. But for everybody else that's wanting to get into Warhammer, I think is that first leap is probably the biggest thing that you have to do. And we've talked about getting kids into Warhammer before on the show. How do you do that? Everybody's going to come at this from a different angle. So my first recommendation on trying to get someone interested that is to find out what their actual interest is. Is it the
Mm,
lore? Is it the look? They just like the idea of space marines or orcs or whatever. If it's specifically lore based, then you get them into the books, and now they have a foundation for this
yeah.
game, and they have something to kind of translate to. Kind of what you were talking about, playing a game and then thinking about it playing out as a movie in your head.
Mm,
Well, somebody who's really into the lore can see a model on the board and know exactly the backstory of this model and why they
mm,
exist and why they're holding that sword. And I remember the aha moment for me with Space Marines. I'm like, why do they have a bunch of like ribbons and little emblems all over their armor? Like, oh, okay, now I get it. Especially with playing uh like Space Wolves with the whole thing about writing down these epic deeds and things that
mm,
they've done. And so now when I put the model together, I can put those on the model and know what that means. Um, so lore is one thing. The other is if they like the painting aspect. Some people really like painting. It's very therapeutic. We talked about mental
mm,
health.
yeah.
That's something to get them into that. But then the game, which is what lured me in. I don't really care about the lore so much. The painting is a means to an end. It was when I did the demo at a Games Workshop store, and I did that quick 20-30 minute little demo, and
Mm,
the wheels started turning in my head because I like all the strategy and the tactics and the competitiveness. That's what got me into it. So I think three different angles, lore, painting, and the artsy side of it, or just the game and tactics. Doing a demo would probably be the best way for me.
mm.
So,
Yeah,
I-
and I think that's where Combat Patrol comes in, doesn't it? You know, it's that's that easy entry, and then for
mhm,
AOS when Spearhead drops, that's going to
yeah,
be that. You know, yeah, he keeps on wanting to play. I've just got to finish building some terrain, otherwise we're having to navigate around boxes of cereal and different things, or just breaking out the pile of potential and just saying this.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's your new inbox. I mean, I think, and this is something we let in with the show on is just how to teach someone how to play Warhammer because
Mm,
I think you bring up an interesting point as first of all, when somebody comes over to your house and sees all of, and I remember the time my older brother came to my house for the first time, seeing all of my painted miniatures, and he walks in and he's not into the nerd realm that I am at all.
mm.
He does not care whatsoever. So he walks in and he just goes, "What is this?" 'Cause I had so much terrain and all this miniature stuff. Um, but for everyone else who walks in, "Oh, wow, and this is
Mm,
so cool, and did you paint all of this?" And that kind of stuff gets them into it. And then teaching someone to play is, I think you need to have a really firm grasp on the rules yourself. You got to
yeah.
really know. You don't have to be a mastermind, but you need to have the core rules down.
Mhm,
But going back to the game day we had at Mechanical Keyboards, I was essentially teaching two other players how to play 10th edition, and also I had to. I'd never played World Eaters. I'd never played AdMech. And
mm.
so I had to very quickly learn their stats and their armies, and then try to teach them how to play while also playing a multiplayer game mode that I had never played before. It was a challenge for sure, But I did want to just take a few moments to give some tips to anyone that's looking to try to get their buddy or significant
Mm.
other or their child or whatever into Warhammer. And I would say I'm first of all, I'm a very competitive person, and Lee, you know this, sometimes to a fault. But I'm competitive. I don't like to lose, and as I've gotten older, that desire to win has tapered off some. So it used to be really really bad. Um, but I think whenever you're teaching someone to play, it is important to remember that the goal is not to win. Like that's not the
Yeah.
goal. It's be great if you do, but
Mhm.
that's not the point of trying to do this. Of trying to teach them. And so, Lee, I was going to ask you when I first, I know you had started with Warhammer Fantasy back in the day, and
Yeah.
hey, what about Warhammer? And you come over and we start playing. Um, I remember the look on your face when all of the rules were starting to come into your head
Yeah.
all at the same time, and you were just like at one point, I looked like you just kinda mentally gave up, and you're just like,
Yeah.
just tell me what to roll," because it was so I mean, did you have that feeling of just being overwhelmed for the first several games?
Yeah, I think, and even now, like it's so funny, but like I understand the movement, like, but it's just I think for me, it was feeling overwhelmed, but wanting to keep up with the pace of the game because I was conscious, like, man, this is taking 6 hours, like this we've got to get to a faster place.
Yeah.
But it was the where I'm trying to remember the terminology now because I've been painting, I've not played, and we've not played in I don't know how
I
long.
know,
Like at
I know.
mechanical keyboards, when I walked in, I was like, "Hi, my name's Lee. I'm on a podcast, and I can't remember how to play." Um, but it was strength versus toughness. That was the
Mhm,
always thing. Was like strength versus toughness, and then you've got the AP, and I'm like, okay, what do I need to roll?
mhm,
Um, because you've played so many times, what helped me was you were like, "Threes, you gotta roll threes," and I was like, "Huh?" And he's like, "Just roll threes. That's it." Like, you know, um, now I'm more accustomed to it, trying to work it
yeah,
out, but even now but then what I did, have is I have a card now that came in a white dwarf, which kinda gives you the ability to look down and go, "Okay, is it half strength, below strength, or whatever?"
mhm,
I think as well, like, if I'm honest with you, like, if I read something, it's not gonna go in. I can get a basic understanding, but my learning style is like, show me. Show
mhm,
me how to do it, and I'll get it. Like, show me a couple of times. It's that teaching, like, watch me, and then you copy me, I watch you, you go on your own. And I
mhm,
think the more I got accustomed with that, the more it became a lot easier and it sped our games up. But at first, some of the terminology your Games Workshop uses not like it's not easy.
yeah,
It's like, okay, this is really simple. Let's make it a little bit more theatrical. And I think it's the theatrical that kind of threw me off. Um, but eventually, like, I got it, and then the game started getting better. Then I started doing things that you would teach, like, okay, hey, can you move slightly closer to the objective when you charge? Like, can you charge around the other side? And then that puts you
mhm,
in a prime position to claim the objective if your OC is higher, or if you wipe that unit out. Or do you want to wipe out the unit fully? Do you want to leave one model? Because if you wipe out the whole model, then you can't charge. But if you leave one model, then you can charge and claim the. And it was suddenly
yeah,
like there was this moment, and I've joked about it on the podcast. It was the equivalent of a kid riding a bike. It's the moment that the parent lets go of the stabilizers, they get lets go of the bike, and the kid's like, "I'm doing it." That's
yeah,
what it felt like. The more I played, at first, it was drinking from the hydrant, you know what I mean? But then the more I played, the more I understood the game, and the more and more I understood the mechanics, and then the more and more I could use your tactics against you. And that was fun. It was the moment where I used tactics that you used on me. I could see you going, "Oh, he's
oh,
learned
no.
that."
The
No.
student has become the
That's
master.
it. That's it. It's the equivalent of like, Anakin Skywalker, and he's
Yeah,
like, and then
exactly.
yeah, and then Obi-Wan, but I have the higher ground. It's like, yeah, you know,
Yeah, I think what was I think that's always the pinnacle. And I remember because I've taught a lot of different people how to play Warhammer, and what is the best for me is when I get to the point where I'm like, oh no, like Lee's picked up on this. I'm seeing some actual thought and tactics going into army list building, and he didn't just throw a bunch of cool models on the board because in the beginning, it's why it's important to not, you're not there to win. That's like the
Mhm,
main goal. It's good to win. I love to win. Everybody loves to win, but when you're teaching someone, don't worry about winning. Just if you need to fudge the rules a little bit, if you need to remove some rules, and
mm,
when I played the multiplayer game, playing against two effectively new players, we didn't do any Overwatch. There was no
mm,
Overwatch. I barely used any stratagems. I told them just don't worry about it. We're not gonna we didn't spend many command points other than to do rerolls. It just you don't need the extra complexity. And
mm,
there are many times when I could have used Overwatch. Orc Overwatch is not great, but there's some other stratagems that I could have used to my advantage. Um, but it's just that is going to add complexity. Let's just have a good time. But I remember playing against you when we first started out, and I remember the game that you beat me when you brought all those Hellblasters, and you had a brick
mm.
of Hellblasters. And I remember what was the character unit that was close by that was giving them the rerolls? There
Yeah,
was a support character. I don't remember
yeah,
what it was, a sergeant or something.
mm,
And so you had the brick of Hellblasters with the buffs to go along with it. And
mm.
then I was playing orcs, and you took out. I think I was playing orcs. Maybe it was Votan at the time in ninth
Perfect.
edition.
Totem. Mm,
Yeah, so you just took a huge chunk out of my army out, and I didn't really. And you had deployed in the right places, and you had a really sound strategy. And I remember when you were asking me questions like, "What do you think? Should I do this or should I do that?" I'm like, "You're on your own. I'm not going to help you here
yeah,
because you had developed a mastery of the rules, and you had
mm,
like it's one of those things where you had done so well. I didn't want to kind of alter that trajectory. If you're going to
yeah,
win, I want you to do it on your own. And then
mm,
you beat me fair and square. And so when you said, "Oh, did you let up?" Absolutely not. No,
mm,
this is all you, man. You did this yourself. And I think what was cool too is that when we started playing more, because I taught you, but then you would go to other people and learn different tactics,
mm,
and then it was just like I'm creating a great opponent, and now you've gone and learned from other people, and now it's
mm,
just a different flavor. So it was just it's a really cool feeling to teach someone how to play, and then to see the joy that you get. It's a different kind, right? The
mm,
painting and all of that. But it's a really cool experience, and I
mm.
recommend it. Just to,
Yeah.
especially if you've got children, to try different strategies for kids.
That's it. I think as well, like what helped me was, I think, you encouraged me, like, because it was only me and you that were playing,
Yeah, yeah,
and then kind of jumped on a Discord server with some of the local game centers and just reached out to people and was like, "Hey, I'm new. I want to learn the game. Anyone available?" And a guy Will, I went out and met him out at Blackthorn, and I played Eldari and he played World Eaters, and he is a great kind of teacher as well. And
yes,
I think
yes,
he understands the rules. Shout out to Will, like he knows his stuff, but
hmm
he took it, even like at that point, I think I'd only just started on the podcast, and I'm going in there going, I think this guy thinks I need to know all the rules, and he was like, and I'd ask him questions like, "Hey, I'm still learning this," and he's like, "It's okay, me too." And he also offered grace. There were times where maybe I forgot to do something, and I'll go, "Oh, I forgot this." He was like, "Oh, just do it," and I was like,
yeah,
"What?" And he's like, "No, just do it," and then he would do something and he'd be like, "Oh, I forgot." Just do it. It's okay. It's a game.
hmm
Um,
hmm
but I think that helps as well. Like if you're a player and you have a basic understanding and you want to grow in the game, jump on in the Discord server with one of your local game centers, or go out to your local game center and ask them, "Hey, do you have a Discord server?" Jump on it and be like, "Hey, I'm a new player. I've played about 10 games. This is my army. Is anyone available to play?" And
Mhm.
you'll be surprised at the amount of people that go, "Yeah, I'm free." And I think that is a great way of stretching yourself, and growing, but also learning new tactics, because it's worth watching how someone plays. Okay, why did they do that? And then ask them, "Hey, why did you do that? Or why did you move that way? Or
Yeah.
why did you charge there when you could have just taken out the army?" And I think that's what has helped me, is playing new players and then asking the question. Like, I would ask you the question all the time, "Hey, why did you do that?" Or, "Hey, how do I handle this?" Now you just go, "No, not giving you anything." But back then back then you
I
were like,
mean,
"Okay, this is how
yeah,
you
but
do it."
I think it's also important to find, because you play against different people and they have different goals for
Mm,
playing. I mean, you play against somebody like Will, and Will is like the kindest, most wonderful person that you could play against, and he's there to have a good time. And but he's also a really good player and knows
mm.
what he's doing. But it's like one of those things where you'd never know, because he's just like, hey, we're gonna have a good time, and I might also destroy you, but you're gonna do it with a smile. But I mean, when you play against me, I'm a little more serious, and I think that I have to constantly tell myself that this is not about winning. This is about just playing and having a good
Mm,
time. Um, but I like to teach people. I want more
mm,
people to play this game, and it's fun to teach. And it is. I don't want to. It's just not a derogatory thing, but it's like when I'm teaching my children how to do something, and then they end up doing it better than me. It's that for any parents out there. This is Dad Hammer. So I mean, if you've ever done that, where you teach your children how to do something, and then they get really really good at it, and it's just like the coolest thing ever. And I'm not trying to say that it's teaching you how to play Warhammer is like teaching a child, but all of us,
It
all
was.
of us, well, our mutual friend Lawson taught me how to play Warhammer, and then at one point I beat him too, right? So it's the same kind of thing. You teach somebody how to do it, and they get the same enjoyment, and then they come back, and now you have somebody at an equal playing field, and
Mm,
there's nothing like it. It's that competitive spirit, but you're
yeah.
doing it in a hobby that both of you really, really love. So
It was that moment where you're like, "Lee, you speak in front of like 400, 500 people like a week, and you're like, you're losing your mind over
yeah.
how far do I move?" Like, it was this,
Oh
you know.
man, that was great. It's that the stress that was on your face. And like, yeah, speaking in front of a group of 500 people, no problem. No,
Yeah.
no issue at all. Determining whether or not you should charge this turn or next at a game of Warhammer in my house. Oh man, racking your brain is so stressful.
It's because, like, I knew I was so close to the win. Is that moment where
Yeah.
because that's the thing, as a beginner, you get to a point where you can win and you can almost taste it, and you're like,
Hmm.
"This could be it."
Yeah.
But, one
One wrong
wrong
move.
move
Yep.
could cost you the game.
Yep.
A failed charge, or or you lose a model, like. And I think that's the beauty of Warhammer, is that no matter how much you play, it's the roll of the dice, and it's chance. And chance may land on your side, or it may land on your opponent's side,
Yeah.
and that's what makes it fun. It's the moments, like, where we're playing, and you've got deadly demise, and we're both chanting for the deadly demise to go off, like,
Yeah.
"Come on." you
Ah,
know
man, it's
it's
the randomness to it, I think,
mm,
that makes it really, really special. And it's the whole point of training someone, teaching someone how to play the game, is just so that you could have those moments and share it with somebody else. And so with that, just to kind of close out this segment, I highly recommend, if you've been playing the game for a long time and you have a decent understanding of the rules, get out there and try to teach someone how to play. They may say, "This is not for me." I've had plenty of those where they just say, "Yeah, this is really cool. I just I can't. I don't want to put together models and paint. So no thanks." And that's okay, right? But there are others that they play one game and they're hooked, like myself, right? And
Mm.
so highly recommend it. Definitely get out there, and again, shout out to the latest issue of White Dwarf. Uh, go pick up that issue. The multiplayer combat patrol is absolutely worth the price of the magazine. So get out there, give that a whirl, and let us know in the comments, either on YouTube or hit us up on Instagram, or send us an email at contact@dadhammerstudios.com. Let us know if you tried the multiplayer, if you've done anything like that, or if you've had epic fails of trying to do the multiplayer custom rules yourself, like we did before the official rules came out. Let us know what your experience was. So, and with that, that will do it for this episode of the Dad Hammer podcast. Thanks to the chaplain. I appreciate your time, your attention, and your service, kind sir. I am David the War Boss, and until next time, remember that all of your pile of potential boxes can double as terrain. Take care, everyone. Have a good week, and we will see you.